The Middle Ages, a time of knights, castles, and kings. But beneath the romantic tales of chivalry and adventure lies a much darker reality. Life was tough, brutal, and for some, dangerously short. While modern jobs have their own risks, few can compare to the perilous professions of the medieval era. Today, we will explore the most dangerous jobs of the Middle Ages, careers where a single mistake could cost you your life. First on our list is a profession that may send shivers down your spine, the executioner. Tasked with carrying out the harshest sentences, these men were responsible for decapitations, hangings, and other forms of brutal punishment. But being an executioner wasn't just physically demanding, it was socially isolating. Despite being employed by the state or a noble, executioners were often shunned by society. Their grim work marked them as outcasts. Mistakes were unforgivable. A botched execution could lead to public humiliation or worse. And while their victims' screams might haunt their nights, they also lived in constant fear of revenge from the families of the condemned. The job came with a steady paycheck, but at the cost of your soul. If you thought executioners had it rough, imagine being a medieval miner. Deep beneath the earth, miners worked in cramped, dangerous conditions to extract precious metals like iron, copper, and silver. Without the benefit of modern equipment, these men used rudimentary tools to dig into the earth. Cave-ins were common, and toxic gases were an ever-present threat. Miners also suffered from something we now know as black lung, a disease caused by inhaling dust and fumes. Many miners didn't live long enough to see their retirement, dying young from lung diseases or horrific accidents. And yet, despite these risks, mining was essential to the economy, making it a high-risk but necessary occupation. In the medieval cities, sanitation was a major issue. Someone had to deal with human waste, and that someone was the gong farmer. This dirty and dangerous profession involved cleaning out the cesspits and latrines. Working at night to avoid the disgusted eyes of the public, these workers would descend into pits of excrement to shovel out waste. Diseases like cholera and dysentery thrived in these conditions, making gong farming one of the deadliest jobs of the time. The foul stench would cling to their clothes and skin, often leading to a social life of complete isolation. It wasn't glamorous, but someone had to do it, and they were paid surprisingly well for their efforts. Leather was a valuable commodity in medieval times, and the process of turning raw animal hides into leather was far from pleasant. Tannery workers were exposed to a variety of dangerous chemicals, including animal urine, quicklime, and dung. The process itself was brutal. Workers had to scrape flesh off the hides, soak them in chemicals, and endure the stench of rotting flesh. Many workers developed skin diseases or respiratory issues from prolonged exposure to toxic fumes. Like the gong farmer, tanners were often shunned due to the smell that clung to them. Yet, leather was in high demand for everything from shoes to armor, so tanneries flourished despite the health risks. Perhaps one of the most iconic and terrifying professions of the medieval world was that of the plague doctor. During times of plague, especially the Black Death, these doctors were tasked with treating the sick and preventing the spread of disease. Dressed in long robes and wearing a beaked mask filled with herbs to ward off the miasma, or bad air, plague doctors ventured into disease-ridden homes. Armed with rudimentary knowledge of medicine and very few tools, they faced overwhelming odds. While some were genuinely trying to help, others were little more than opportunists, charging exorbitant fees for their services. Most doctors did not survive long. Exposure to the plague, poor hygiene, and the lack of effective treatments meant that many plague doctors contracted the very diseases they sought to cure. Yet, during the pandemics, this was a job that was always in demand. War was a constant in the Middle Ages, and soldiers, especially mercenaries, lived dangerously. Medieval warfare was brutal, with close combat fighting, siege warfare, and a high risk of injury or death. Mercenaries, who fought for pay rather than for loyalty to a king, often faced even greater risks. They were sent into the most dangerous battles, tasked with impossible missions, and when their services were no longer needed, they were often left to fend for themselves, sometimes even hunted by former employers. In an era without antibiotics, Even minor injuries could lead to deadly infections. And if the battlefield didn't kill you, starvation or disease in the aftermath of war just might. The Middle Ages was a time of hardship, where survival itself was often the greatest achievement. These professions were essential to the functioning of medieval society, yet they came with a steep price. Whether it was disease, injury, or the constant threat of death, those who worked these dangerous jobs helped shape the world we live in today. Next time you complain about your job, remember, you could have been an executioner, a plague doctor, or worse, a gong farmer.